On my birthday, no one from my family showed up, not even my wife. I called my wife. She laughed. "I'm in Europe with your rich brother." My brother added, "Why bother? She'll divorce you soon." I said nothing. I just sent a photo of me with a surprise guest. My wife kept calling. I smiled, turned off my phone, and popped the bottles. Chapter 1. The Empty Table. The restaurant was quiet except for the clinking of glasses from other tables, balloons sagged against the ceiling, a cake sat untouched, and the clock ticked past the hour I had asked everyone to arrive. I checked my phone. Not a single call, not a single message. My wife, my brother, my family. None of them were here. On my birthday. At first I thought maybe traffic had delayed them, maybe there was some surprise in the works. But as the minutes turned into hours, the truth became painfully clear. I dialed my wife. She answered with a laugh. The sound of music and clinking glasses in the background. "I'm in Europe with your rich brother," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. And then, faintly, I heard his voice too. My own brother. "Why bother? She'll divorce you soon." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my chest heavy, but my face calm. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I opened my gallery, selected a photo I had prepared for this very moment, and sent it to them both. A photo with a surprise guest. Within minutes, my phone exploded with calls, her name flashing again and again. My brother's too. But I didn't answer. I poured a drink, raised the glass to my lips, and smiled as I turned the phone off. The night wasn't ruined, no, it was just beginning. Chapter 2. The Surprise Guest. The phone kept buzzing on the table but I let it ring. I wasn't going to answer, not yet. The picture I'd sent wasn't random, it was calculated. In it, I stood shoulder to shoulder with a man they never expected to see next to me. My father's oldest business partner, a billionaire investor who had quietly stepped back from the spotlight years ago. To them, he was untouchable, a legend. To me, he was family, a mentor who had stepped in when my own blood betrayed me. In that single photo, smiling with a glass of whiskey in hand, I'd silently said, "I'm not alone. I've never been alone." That's why the calls started flooding in. They knew what it meant. They knew this wasn't just me celebrating my birthday. This was me signaling that the balance of power had shifted. My wife's laughter from Europe, my brother's smug voice over the phone, both of them had believed I was powerless. That I had no one left. Now they were realizing they'd miscalculated. Badly. As their calls went unanswered, I popped the cork on the first bottle. The crisp sound of champagne bursting filled the quiet apartment. I poured 2 glasses, slid one across the table to my guest, and raised mine in a toast. "To family," he said with a smile. "The ones we choose, not the ones who betray us." I clinked my glass against his, the bubbles fizzing like laughter in the air. While my wife and brother clinked glasses in Europe, thinking they had me beaten, I was here, celebrating with the one man who could bring their entire world crashing down. And soon, he would. Chapter 3. The Alliance. The bubbles fizzed gently in my glass, but my guest's words carried more weight than any toast I had ever heard. He leaned back, his eyes sharp, his voice calm. "I knew your brother would try to cut you out one day. That's why I made sure my shares never went to him. He's reckless. You're steady." I froze. For years, my brother had strutted around as if he controlled everything. The money, the family business, the respect. But here, across the table, the man who had once bankrolled our father's empire was telling me the truth. My brother's power was an illusion. And with a stroke of a pen, that illusion could be shattered. We talked deep into the night. Business contracts. Old clauses my brother had ignored could now be activated. Partnerships. Silent allies in the company had long grown tired of his arrogance. Timing. All it needed was the right moment, and his empire would crumble like sand through fingers. My guest promised one thing. When the time came, I wouldn't need to shout, argue, or fight. I'd just need to smile while my brother's world collapsed under the weight of his own greed. As my wife and brother laughed together in Europe, mocking me as powerless, I was sitting with the men who held the keys to their downfall. The betrayal had stung, yes. But now it was transforming into something far more powerful. Opportunity. I switched my phone back on before midnight, just long enough to see another dozen missed calls from my wife, followed by a final text from my brother. "Enjoy your little birthday alone." I smiled, set the phone face down, and raised my glass again. "To the Empire," I whispered. "Theirs is ending. Mine is just beginning." Chapter 4. The First Strike. The birthday night faded into morning, but my calm hadn't left me. If anything, it grew stronger. While my brother and my wife paraded around Europe posting photos of their new life, I was already moving the first piece of the puzzle. I didn't confront them, I didn't post online. I simply called the contacts my mentor had given me, the ones my brother didn't even know existed. By noon, old partners who had once supported my father began taking my calls. They weren't loyal to my brother, they were loyal to stability. And they'd had enough of his arrogance. Later that week, a quiet rumor surfaced in the business world. Word spread that my brother had been moving money recklessly, putting joint ventures at risk. The rumor wasn't mine, but I knew exactly who had planted it. My guest had kept his word, the empire would begin to crumble from the inside. My brother's name, once synonymous with confidence, was suddenly linked with whispers of instability. That same evening, my phone lit up again. This time, not with laughter or mockery, but with desperation. A string of texts from my wife. "Where are you? Please pick up. We need to talk, it's serious." I didn't reply. Not yet. Because she hadn't realized the most dangerous part of betrayal. Once the mask slips, there's no putting it back on. They thought my silence on my birthday was weakness. But that silence was the first strike. And soon, it would echo louder than their laughter ever had. Chapter 5. Cracks in their empire. The laughter and arrogance they'd flaunted in Europe didn't last long. Like cracks in glass, their confidence began to splinter. Small at first, then spreading until everything they thought was solid threatened to shatter. My brother's reckless spending had always been tolerated because people assumed he was untouchable. But now that the rumors of instability were circulating, investors started digging deeper. One partner quietly pulled out of a joint venture, another froze their capital, demanding clarifications. The chain reaction was devastating. Contracts stalled, projects halted, and the people who once begged for his attention began ignoring his calls. For the first time, my brother wasn't laughing. And my wife, the woman who had laughed in my face on my birthday, now filled my phone with desperate messages. "He's not telling me everything. Do you know what's happening? People are whispering about bankruptcy. Is it true? Please, let's talk." I made a mistake. Every text was proof that her world, built on arrogance and betrayal, was collapsing around her. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Because the mentor at my side had timed everything perfectly. Each whisper, each frozen account, each pulled contract. All of it had been engineered to show one truth. My brother was no empire builder. He was reckless, and he was finished. On my birthday, they mocked me. Certain I was powerless. Now, just weeks later, their empire was crumbling, their laughter silenced, and their phones buzzing with the kind of desperation I had once felt. The difference was, I wasn't desperate anymore. I was in control. Chapter 6. The public humiliation. The downfall of their private empire wasn't enough. The world needed to see it. And when it came, it was brutal, swift, and unforgettable. The first strike happened in the press. A leading financial paper ran a headline. Brothers' company facing liquidity crisis. Investors back away. It wasn't just a business note. It was a scarlet letter. His name, once tied to power, was now synonymous with collapse. Competitors mocked him. Investors abandoned him. Former friends avoided his calls, not wanting to sync with him. But the real humiliation came at the charity gala he had insisted on attending. This was the event he'd bragged about for years, where he strutted across the floor with my wife on his arm, pretending they were royalty. Only this time, whispers followed them everywhere. Guests didn't smile. They smirked. Business leaders who once fawned over him now gave him cold, pitying nods. And then, as if on cue, a large screen cycling through sponsor logos flickered. And one of the investors who had pulled out publicly thanked me for continuing my father's legacy responsibly. The spotlight hit me across the room, where I stood with my mentor and a circle of allies. My brother froze. My wife turned pale. The room erupted in murmurs. They tried to pretend nothing was wrong. But everyone saw their betrayal, their arrogance, their untouchable image. All shattered in front of hundreds of eyes. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to confront them. My silence was louder than any victory speech. On my birthday they mocked me, laughing from Europe. But under the chandelier of that gala, it was my turn to smile. While they finally understood what regret really tastes like. Chapter 7. The final blow. Their empire had cracked. Their reputation was in ruins. But there was still one last card to play. The strike that would end everything they thought they controlled. Behind the scenes, my mentor and I had been preparing for weeks. The contracts my brother had signed carelessly. The debts he had ignored. The silent partners he had betrayed. All of it had been meticulously documented. When the lawsuit landed on his desk, it wasn't just a case. It was a demolition order. Breach of fiduciary duty. Misuse of family assets. Fraudulent transfers through shell accounts. The court froze his accounts immediately. Properties he boasted about owning were seized pending investigation. His European lifestyle collapsed overnight. Flights cancelled. Cards declined. Allies gone. And my wife? The woman who had laughed on my birthday while sipping champagne with him. She was dragged down with him. Once the finances were frozen, she realized the rich brother she had chosen had nothing left to give. Calls to me turned from arrogant to pathetic. Please, I was wrong. I made a mistake. Let's fix this. But mistakes can't be undone when they're chosen deliberately. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her regret was her prison, and she'd live in it for the rest of her life. The press had a field day. The once proud power couple became headlines for scandal, fraud, and betrayal. While they were shunned, I was invited to step into the spotlight. The rightful heir to my father's legacy. The men who weathered betrayal with calm precision. I didn't need revenge served hot. I let it simmer, patient and silent, until the perfect moment came to serve it cold. In court, in the press, and in their own shattered reflections. On my birthday, my wife laughed. I'm in Europe with your rich brother. Now, years later, the only caption that followed them was this. Bankrupt. Disgraced. Abandoned. And me? I smiled, popped another bottle. Not in rage this time, but in peace. Because their laughter had ended, and my silence had won. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Tell us what you have think about this story in the comments below. Like the story. If you think this story is justified, share it with someone who needs this energy.